I when I got the email, I was going to have both of you. I was doubly excited, so it worked out really well. I just got to
Great.
straighten up
Right
my
on.
my tripod there. We have Buffalo Bills dress up day at work on Fridays, so hence the reason I got my Bills gear on.
Hmm. Love the Bills.
Oh, awesome. So I guess that I think we got about 40 minutes, and I'll start out with wow on the documentary, Mike. I mean, just absolutely breathtaking. I mean, it was, I think you always gamble when you have a documentary that's that long, but the way that you broke it up made sense, and it was very watchable. I watched it over the course of probably 5 or 6 days, and
Okay.
man, just wonderful. I mean, when you originally went into the project, was that the intent that you were gonna break it up, or did it just kind of wind up evolving into that?
No, I was really Tom, right from the very beginning when I first started talking to Paul and the guys about doing it. I literally don't know why, but I just saw it the four pieces. I could sort of visualize almost like on a graph, like the takeoff, the build up, the big early days, and then the lift off stage, and then the middle years, and then obviously the fourth episode, the kind of last couple of years of the band's career and Gordy's life. So it just felt like this is the only way to do this to tell this story. Obviously, there's a ton of different ways you could have done it, but
Mhm.
it just seemed to make sense to me.
Paul, what was your reaction the first time that you saw the thing from beginning to end?
Um, a feeling of being overwhelmed for sure. There's lots of stuff in there, and just to touch on what you were asking, Mike, we didn't have to do that because we trusted Mike. We knew it was going to be a beginning to end story. Gradually, he kept us obviously very informed and with rough cuts and all this kind of stuff. And so gradually, before it was in the early stages of, say our first round of many, many interviews with Mike, individual interviews, um, we learned that it would be, about 4 hour, 1 hour episodes. And so, yeah, I think we were all curious. Through, but we were all talking with Mike. So throughout the process, which was, I don't know, like years, Yeah. three at least, maybe four, and we were being informed. Mike had questions for us individually, things that come up, and the next round of interviews, what are we going to do, or we need these extra shots. So everyone was pretty fully informed, but I don't think any of us had a sense of how you were going to do that, Mike. How it was going to lay out, like the stages. We all knew early days. Well, way more footage from the early days was one reaction I had than I expected. Um, and but I listen. It would be a nightmare if we didn't like this, and we all love it, and we all trusted that Mike would do it, but didn't expect anything as kind of classically told story. And it's odd to watch it. It's odd to watch it with people. I did sit down and watch it with my wife, and that was a preferred experience just because I wasn't kind of looking at myself like, oh, what's everyone thinking now? But no, just very impressed, and we all like it. And honestly, um, it's a key thing that we do, because it tells a real story and it tells the truth, and it's no puff piece. And so it's just an excellent job, which I've told you, Mike, many times before, but I'll
Yeah.
tell you again, just an
Yeah.
excellent job. Appreciate that. I
I
appreciate
think the thing that struck me was, and I hope you take this as a compliment, but it wasn't until the fourth episode that I realized that you were his brother. Like I just, it was such a well done documentary, but the fourth just became so personal, and even the relationship between you and Paul, Mike, seem to have sort of maybe a more special connection than with any of the other subjects that you interviewed specifically for the documentary. I mean,
Mhm.
is that how it is, or is it just happened to be that things sort of fell that way?
Well, you've got to remember, Paul and I go back almost as far as he goes back with Gord. So when Gord and Paul became best friends in grade 11, Paul was over at our house every day. I mean, I've known Paul since, he was 16, I was 20. And Yeah, we've been at each other's weddings all the way through. So I just feel like, I mean, Paul was kind of, as Gord was a part of the Langlois family, Paul was part of the Downie family. So that's just the way it's been forever. And I always have I just always have a very, yeah, I think Paul and I have a very nice relationship. We, both love this same guy. And Gord was a huge part of my life, huge part of Paul's life, just the way it was designed. So yeah, I have a lot of comfort with Paul. I really, my wife, we was in Vancouver at the film festival, and she was sitting with Paul at dinner the night before the festival, and our paths don't cross quite the way they used to 25 years ago, but afterwards she was just saying how it was just so comforting to be talking to Paul, just to hear that familiar voice and those all that kind of stuff. And as soon as she said it, I was like, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's just like that's kind of but yeah, no, yeah, no, I love Paul. I always have, and I always, the other thing about with Paul, sorry, it's kind of funny that Paul's on the line too.
Oh no, it's fine.
Let's see if we can see if I can make him blush. But the other thing I will say with Paul, and I said this to him when we were interviewing, I just always appreciated what he gave to my brother, Gord, and I don't mean in the band. I really mean like as friends, because Gord had a very as confident as he was super sensitive. Things could throw him off, like a perceived slight or something. And Paul was just, and so Gord was just that, he was kind of like that his whole life probably, but he'd be very sensitive. And Paul has always been so steady, like he's very unflappable. And I always loved the way that Gord was able to sort of be just kind of stabilized in a way by his friendship with Paul. It was, he didn't have to worry about anything, and Paul just has a very calming influence in just as an individual. And no more was that apparent than with Gord. Like it was, I could yeah, I mean, I can literally, what I'm talking about, I'm actually seeing in my mind as I'm describing it. So, yeah, I do feel like I have a very special relationship with Paul. I absolutely do.
Yeah, and
Thanks,
Paul, I
Mike.
mean, when you were talking about spending the last moments of Gord's life with him, and I mean, I just went through that with a very close friend myself, and it was just, and when you put it in words about how it really draws you closer, I could really relate to that. I mean, that's as heartbreaking and as crushing of a moment as that is between two people. There's a certain beauty that I'm really glad that you were able to convey in how that all brought a sense of peace, along with, of course, the mourning that goes along with it.
Yeah, it was, but he was so dignified about everything. Um, and this kind of horrible disease, you can't control kind of who it brings out in yourself, and it brought out sweetness in Gord. And he always had a sweet side, but he was just very sweet. And there is a point in the doc that I like. I like the fact that it's in there because we were best friends since the first day of grade 11. And all the way through, and I never expected to be asked to be in the band. Like I wasn't looking that way, but then, I was thinking of going to Nashville and he didn't like it. So all of a sudden he asked the other guys, hey, can we get Paul in the band, basically to stop him from hitchhiking down to Nashville? And I'm sure he was worried because I would have been chewed up down there at that time, just 20 years old and maybe 6 or 7 not bad songs. Anyway, and I already was a fan of their band, so it was an immediate yes. But I also like that, Mike asked at some point in the doc, it's later on, I don't know if it's 3 or 4, but just episode 3 or 4, but I say, which I'm very happy I said it, that as soon as I saw Gord when he'd had 2 brain surgeries and I ended up moving up, I was just supposed to be visiting for one night to watch a Bruins game. And I'm not a Bruins fan, but I wanted to, see Gord. And 30 years at least of small tensions, because we had small tensions in the band. We're making things, creating. So certainly Gord and I were very up and down in how our particular relationship was going. Fortunately, it was 90% great. But that all peeled away. It all slipped away immediately as soon as we saw each other. It was just kind of like, okay, we're in tough now. And I just like that I was able to say that, because it's these admissions, these truths, the true talk, I think make the doc. And it's true. We had 30 years of small tensions. We got in fights. And it was because we were in a band together and trying to schedule things around when we're touring, when we're recording, we're all having kids, it's just, it got tough. In the second half, it gets tough. In the first half, as Mike has described before, we're rising and we're into it. And, maybe we're gradually getting married, but kids aren't around yet. And so there was such a freedom to work and to keep at it. And then life gets complicated, which I do believe it's a classic part of any lifetime story. And it's certainly quite evident in No Dress Rehearsal.
Yeah, and you touched on another part. You embrace those tensions. Like, it doesn't feel like you just gloss over that. Because obviously somebody passes away. There's a period of time where you can't talk anything negative about them. But again, you're talking about the band. You're not necessarily talking about one person, but one person within that dynamic. And those dynamics, especially when you're close, can become very complicated. And hopefully this question makes sense, because one of the things that pulled me from that I pulled out of the documentary that I was surprised about, and maybe people that have followed your career a little closer weren't surprised, was the songwriting arrangement, like that you guys had in terms of royalties and everything. And when that came up, I thought, wow, that is genius, because at the core, that could be a very tense thing. But then you also flipped it to the other side where it was like, well, Gord's doing all the lyrics, but I don't really know how I feel about this. Yeah, maybe the money's there, but at the end of the day, I'm still a creator. I'm still a musician. So I don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah, well, they weren't interrogations by Mike,
right?
But I was sitting there thinking, I hope he's doing this to the other guys, because we all got individually interviewed, and I thought, guy, he's really going after me about like the problems.
Yeah.
The tensions, the songwriting, Gord taking over the lyrics for Road Apples On, and Gord playing guitar, and Chris and Kate joining the band, like all this. If that stuff wasn't in there, it'd be kind of a cool concert doc, because there's lots of great music, and but it's a story more than anything, and it's a Kingston story too, and a concert story, and what happens backstage, and but it explores and tells the tough times. So it became obvious to me that Mike did the same thing to the other guys. He asked the tough questions, and Mike had a view into that it wasn't all rosy all the time, and so he you know, he asked so many questions. We did so many hours of interview, and to be able to cobble this together in the way it presents is quite a feat. And then Mike, I think I met the superstar editor you had, the guy with the curly hair on the first night.
Yeah, it looked a bit like Bob Dylan early days.
Was that the guy?
Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, Peter. So
Yeah.
I said to Peter after, I'm like, he's like, yeah, I'm editor. I'm like, you're the guy? And he's like, oh, what do you mean? I'm like, no, yeah, I heard about you. Excellent job. He's young.
Yeah. 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 Very, very good. Very talented. Very talented.
Obviously. And just the whole, I just love that it's a real thing. That's the reaction I'm getting like all the time. Of course, no one's going to come up and say I hated your doc, but
Yeah, of course.
they really want to talk about it. They want to talk, and what they want to talk about is the bonding and the journey and how much work it was, but they also want to talk about the troubles and the tensions, and of course, you know, the way it all sadly had to end.
Mhm.
But there's also the achievement of what
Yeah.
Gord was able to do. You know, no one could do that. No one could do what he did.
Yeah, and Mike, you know, I had this on my list of questions, and so it may be a little disjointed, but I know yesterday was the anniversary of your brother's passing, and you know, I mean, when somebody passes away, those anniversaries as the years go by, there's something my mother said to me that really stuck with me. Before she passed away, her father had died, I think, I don't know, 30 years before when we were having this conversation, and then my father passed, and I said to her, I go, well, when do you get over your father passing? And she just looked me dead in the eye and she goes, you never get over it. It's always tough. You just learn to accept it and maneuver it. And I'm wondering if you had to get to that point before, I mean, even both of you were able to approach this project in a way where it just wasn't emotionally just too much. And maybe even where your thoughts were yesterday in terms of another anniversary going by.
Well, in terms of working on the film, we sat down for our first set of interviews, and it was a kind of a before we had really were officially in production, but we wanted to get into our old high school, KCVI, because it had been the students had been cleared out, it had been sold to Queen's University, and it was vacant. And it was going to be you know, whatever Queens is going to do with it. So there was kind of a window to get in there. So we went in at this time of year in 2021 and did our first round of interviews with the guys and a few of the other Rick from Rick and the Rodents and we did a couple of other interviews as well. And I remember that being really you know, it'd been 4 years because it was this time of year. It was October, so it had been 4 years since Gordy had passed, and it felt like it had been 4 weeks. You know, like it. And because I was going to sit down with each guy, and we're going to talk about the early days, maybe not get quite into the granular part about, you know, Gordy's you know, diagnosis and all that, but it's all related because we're talking about relationship and all that. And that felt, and being in the old school, and so that had a real gravitas to it, like it definitely did. But you know, and I was, you know, I had the fear, I had tears, you know, but it didn't stop. That like we then were in production the whole next year, 2022. Our interviews were sort of spread out over the whole year, like every couple of months, sort really. And it actually it didn't really change. It was just, but it kind of got a little bit just, you know, it's you know, it's really hard to put my finger on. Like the grief part of it is just always there, but there's a bit of with time comes clarity, I think. So you still have the same kind of feeling about, and you're conjuring up these memories. And but with time, I think you have some clarity, like you can sort of think about things as they were, but and then now that it's over, and this was kind of the first anniversary now in a while that I haven't been actively working on trying to tell Gord and the band's story. I'm just as confused as ever. You know, like I miss him. I miss him. And I was thinking earlier, if we were talking a year ago, I might have said like, oh, I feel like I'm kind of closer to him. Well, I've got his notebooks right beside me in the office or at the edit suite. Like I've got these, he's all around me. So he feels a little bit closer. And then I kind of realized I don't think that's really even true. I feel like these are things and they're making me miss him even more. You know what I'm saying? So I can't even say there's progress. There's just clarity, maybe. It's not much of an answer, but
No, it's a great answer. I mean, I can relate 100% in terms of, like you said, there's an oddness because again, you feel the presence, and in his case, you know, you have the music too, and even as you look
and the
at the
music.
documentary, he's present in the documentary. This doesn't feel like a it doesn't feel like a history piece. Like this guy's
that's good.
been dead for hundreds of years. You know, this is a guy who seems very alive at the center of the story. You know.
That's
I agree. And you know, it's just a lucky thing as you were talking there, Mike. You know, it's spot the guy who's done a few documentaries, you know. So and Mike has. And you can't just, like, I've learned this from just watching how he and his team put because they all worked hard too. But sort of we're able to sort of, you can't just kind of talk about it. You have to storyboard it. You have to think of things like, let's go into their old high school where Mike went as well, and let's darken the gym, you know, and really ask, just in that particular section, ask about high school, ask about what that was like, what was Gord like. Robbie's hilarious, you know. It's just Mike was just able to get us to talk about things, and it's just lucky. We're lucky right now that this documentary exists, because it kind of almost helps. You know, there's a lot of, we've never worried about Buffalo. You know, there's a lot of hip fans in Buffalo.
Yep.
Buffalo's one of our best cities ever, included with Toronto in that, you know, in that echelon. But there's a lot of people out there. Yeah, I heard the hip. Yeah, I think, what was that song, Blow It I Do? Or, you know, this is a story of 5 friends from high school, started a band after that, and stayed together. And bands don't stay together that long. It never works out perfectly. Now there are bands that where it has, but not quite in the same sort of way. And I think this doc just opens people's eyes. You know, hip fans, even super fans, learn a lot. They didn't know certain things. I mean, I was learning as I was listening to the other guys' interviews. You know, just I don't know. It's just we're just lucky to have this document now, and we'll always have it. Can't take it away from us. And so it's just been a very mutually excellent thing between Mike and all the Downies, including Pat, who did so much for Gord, but they all did. And you know, we get a nice chunk of Downie stories because Gord's not around to tell his stories anymore. And so this documentary wouldn't have happened if it wasn't, in particular, Gord's older brother, who was experienced at making documentaries. I mean, that's just a piece of luck. And I think we're all walking around, you know, as Mike said, as confused as ever and as missing him as ever, because, we'd be on the road right now or in the studio if this didn't happen to Gord. And very likely we'd be a long way from making a documentary. So, yeah, there's sadness, and I'm traveling right now in Dallas right now, and it's not only on October 17th every year. It just, as you know about grief that you described. Anyway, it just hits you when it hits you, and
Yep.
4 years after he died, I think we were all ready to talk. We wouldn't have been 2 years after at all. So the timing of the proposition worked for all of us too. But just to start it at our high school is amazing, and just the whole way it's laid out is exactly what you want. And that's the feedback I'm getting from whether it's a big Hip fan or someone who's casual and hasn't checked in a long time. So just feel lucky about that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, my absolute favorite part of the documentary is when you guys get back together after he had passed and you hadn't seen each other for a long time, and just the way that it was like, man, we really love each other. Because really central to the story is, which to me, as I listened to the music, and this documentary just made me want to go back and listen to a lot of these records again from a different perspective. You use that term clarity, and as I listened to it, I think, man, now I get it. Like, it's almost like the Beatles. Those are four guys that grew up together. And granted, they only stayed together for 6 years, but it was because of the relationship between those guys beyond just creating that they created something magical. And you guys were very similar. There was, that lineup was sacrosanct. Like you said, it wasn't like, the guitarist is gone. Oh, get another guitarist. Drummer's gone. Get another drummer. It's like, no, these are all pieces to the puzzle that are crucial to who we were. And that's why we can't have the reunion show, or we can't have all that other stuff because it's been written,
I agree.
Was there anything, Mike, in particular? We've talked about a lot of stuff that's kind of heart moving and things like that. Was there a part? I thought the Road Apples thing, I didn't know that part. And then when it turned out it's just poop, I thought it was hilarious. But was there anything you discovered along the way that you just had to just laugh and say, "Oh my God, this is hilarious. This is great stuff"?
That's in the documentary.
Even if it didn't make it to the documentary, maybe just something you ran across that you're just like, "Oh my God, there's my brother, being crazy or whatever."
I don't know about that, Tom. I have to think about that for a second. I do. Yeah, in terms of, I thought you were going to ask about stuff that didn't make the cut, that I always expected to be in there. The one part that never got in, which I was kind of surprised me later, was just the whole connection with hockey and the band. Because it was like, oh, we can break out from Lonely End of the Rink or from Fireworks, and we can get into the story about how popular the band was in so many NHL dressing rooms, like across the league. And I remember Paul must have the same thing. He had this clear plastic bag with jerseys with his, I think most of them had Downie on the back, that had just been given to them at every stop along the way. And I'm like, holy smokes, Gordy. Like, these jerseys are worth like a couple of $100 a pop. This is unbelievable. And it was just that, well, every time they went to an arena, the guys would be hanging around to meet the band and to go to the concert and stuff. I always thought that was so amazing. And I always just loved that part of I remember Gord had a hockey stick signed by the great Finnish player who got 76. What's that?
Salane.
Yeah. Signed in his rookie season when he got the 76 goals, and we were going to play hockey. And Gord's like, "Here, use this." And I'm like, "Use this?" I was like, "Don't worry about it." I'm like, Oh my God, Gordy, no, give me a different. I'll shoot the wrong way. I don't care. I'm not using Solani's stick. But it was just so, it was just such a, and we didn't, whether it was that or Don Cherry, and we got Rob McLean in there, so that helped a little bit. But I always thought that would be a part of it. And but so but no, in terms
Okay.
of like, I don't know, I learned a lot about Gord, and from his notebooks. That part I came to really respect was just, and I knew it because he got me. I kept a day timer based on Gord kept a day timer. He kept the September to September day timer. The new year begins on Labor Day or September 1st, not January 1st. And that Gord always had the academic day timer. And we've got all those here, my brother Patrick and I. But as you go through those, so he's got two sets of books. Got the day timer with all the to-dos, which maybe the odd, no creative stuff really, some doodles and stuff. But then he's got a second set of books, and that's all the creative. And he just had these two books going all the time. And you never find like I've got day timers, and you'll just go, oh, I stopped writing in it for a week or two. Not Gord. Every day, the whole page is full by the end of the day. New page. And the same with his creative, like his ideas book or whatever his little black books is basically what they were. So what I really, and I wish I was more like him in this way, so regimented, like so process. He has a process, doesn't, stick with the program, and I really respect that a lot because that's how you make progress. It's like working out. You don't do it when you feel like it. You do it because it's whatever. You do it. So that part of it, I really came away thinking, for somebody who appeared on stage to just be so obviously just in the moment and everything else, boy, oh boy, did he ever like to have his systems. He had his systems. This wasn't a guy who like lived his life by the seat of his pants. He was a pretty organized guy.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like to some degree that may have helped him with that final tour because I mean, it sounded like it was quite a challenge. But I wonder, Paul, because I know in the documentary you did such a great job with this part too, Mike. It's like, a lot of times, I mean, I love music and I go to a lot of concerts. I just absolutely love live music and the live music experience. But, you don't always have that sense of finality. I think the band, The Last Waltz, did a real nice job with that, even though they reunited without Robbie Robertson later on. But a lot of times like the Who, how many final shows did the Who have? That's the other end of the spectrum. Whereas it felt like this is maybe one of the few, if any, real examples of a band really having a final show that was worthy of being a final show. And it felt like you didn't have anything else to say after that show because you definitely said it. Is that how it felt, Paul?
Yeah, it did. It was, as you say, a challenging tour, very challenging for Gord, but also very challenging for us. He wanted to do obscure stuff, and I would define obscure stuff as really anything from In Violet Light on. It's obscure stuff because we would only really, we may do like a surprise opening show of the tour in a club and play all those songs, but then it would whittle down to two or three because they're competing with 100th Meridian and all these other songs, Locked in the Trunk, just songs that were staples of the set. And so there was less room for the new stuff. And so 9 songs out of all the records after that, of which there was a few, we would consider obscure. And Gord wanted to do obscure songs. So I'd be on the phone with, Sinclair and Robbie and Johnny saying, listen, he wants to do Struggle Has a Name, from We Are the Same. And not Johnny, but the other two are like, what? We can't do that song. We haven't played it in like 15 years. Well, he wants to do it. He works out every day at 1 and he's listening to Obscure Hip and he's coming up and saying to me, he wants to do that song. He wants to do. And so with that tour, it was kind of designed to have one obscure record per, and then have the rest be, and there were songs of 4 from each record. So there was one obscure one. So everyone's job was, here's the obscure record. And they all had the set list on the flights to Victoria. They had every set list, 15 of them. We had a couple times where a guy would plead, not tonight. How about night 2 in Calgary? I'm not ready. And it's like, okay, but it's on the list. So this is a time thing. We got to do it. We got to do it in a night from now. And so, yeah, it was a big challenge. And I think as it was going well and it went well right off the bat, it was just kind of like, okay, halfway through, it's kind of like, okay, we're laughing here. This is going to be great. And then we get to Kingston. Yeah, we were aware CBC was going to film it, and we were aware that it was a big deal. Like, everyone was kind of more bummed out. This is likely going to be our last one. I mean, if we really do the math, he's not going to be able to do this again. And anyway, we got off the stage after the show in Kingston. We didn't notice, as Gord Downie had put it, all the hoopla of all the cameras and all the extras and people watching all over the country. That wasn't on our mind. We were just trying to turn on that crowd that was in front of us and with us. And but by the time he got down the stairs and we walked backstage, Gord was like, yep, that felt like the last one. And we were all like, yep, felt like the last one. How are we going to top that? And so it was very natural, because he and all of us were kind of like, well, maybe we could, go to Montreal or out to Halifax after this or whatever. And even right, the day before the show, the Kingston show, that was still on everyone's mind. Well, maybe we'll take this another week or two and maybe, come back. And when Gord said that felt like the last show, I think we all just were like, yeah, it sure did. And we've done it. We did it. And then that gave Gord a chance, a big chance to do what he really wanted to do, which was Secret Path and shining a light up there in the north. And he managed to accomplish that, which is, it's funny, really. Yeah, it's comedic how fucking ambitious he was. It's just like, I don't mean funny, haha, but it is a little bit. That's who he was. As you're talking about the books, the to-do list, and he had his process, and next on the docket was, okay, now I'm going to do Secret Path and follow that through. And sure enough, he did. So, I'm just, I was always very impressed with him and with that sort of work ethic, and but also an open mind sort of ethic, and caring about the people up north. Even in high school, like, he was ahead of his time. It bothered him. And I was like, oh, really? Yeah. It's like, oh, it's bad up there. Yeah. I'm very proud of him and happy that he got to achieve so much.
Well, we're getting to the point where we got to wrap up. So I've got to ask the Buffalo / United States question. And it's funny how throughout your career you were and I know the documentary, Mike, you did a great job of tackling this. So kind of a two-parter. I got a very close friend. He's in a tribute band called the Strictly Hip, and they do such a great job with your music.
Jeremy Hoyle.
Oh, yes, Jeremy Hoyle. Yep. So, yes, good friend of mine.
Him on Twitter. I follow them.
Yeah, they're a great band. My friend is Bruce Wojcik. He's the guitarist, and he does a great job as well. The whole band does. I mean, they just do such a beautiful interpretation of your music. But it's kind of a testament to the fact that a Tragically Hip tribute band can survive and do well in Buffalo. I mean, this is an area that really embraced you. If you could give me some of like your earliest memories of Buffalo just kind of showing up, and when you realized that maybe you had that special relationship with Buffalo as a city, and then secondarily just kind of finish up with, I noticed in the documentary, and I kind of had to agree that everyone was like, oh, they never did well in America. And it's like, we're playing some great rooms in America. I don't know if that's necessarily a fair criticism.
Yeah, I mean, we were aware of Buffalo very early on. We treated it like Hamilton or Toronto, and we moved up fairly quickly, relatively speaking, to other towns where we weren't getting the radio play. We got radio play in Buffalo, and all of a sudden, I don't know what, like by the time Fully Completely Day for Night, we were playing the arena in Buffalo. And Buffalo, just like us, except kind of extra special. I mean, just like Canadian cities, Vancouver, Toronto, or Calgary. Buffalo has kind of an extra thing. Buffalo fans are different. They're used to tailgate parties. They're tough, but they're extremely loyal to the hip. We always knew it, and we always took advantage of it, and enjoyed it because the crowds were excellent and they knew their stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, I almost avoid when someone says, "Oh, you didn't do that well in America." I almost avoid saying, "Well, you should have come to a Buffalo show," because it's just, it's almost like we have to kind of group Buffalo in with Canada because but we played at arenas in Detroit too. Wasn't quite as over the top as Buffalo was, and theaters in Seattle. So those are three border stories. Well, Buffalo was a big one, and yeah, we just always felt so good to play in Buffalo, and that included the early days where it was kind of like, yeah, we got full rooms here. Let's just do it. So we will always love Buffalo.
And Buffalo will love you back.
It appears a guarantee. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much, Mike. Just I can't thank you enough for that great documentary. My granddaughter has been just sitting here quietly waiting to see her papa while I've been doing this interview. So she's done a really nice job. You want to say hi, Michelle?
Hi, Michelle.
But yeah. So what's next for you, Mike, in terms of a documentary? And then Paul, I know you've got some solo work, and you got a solo band that you've been doing some work, and there's box sets coming up. What's a quick elevator pitch from both of you?
I got a couple things that I'm developing. Definitely been giving myself a little time just to enjoy this ride and the rollout the way it's been for the last month and a half. But yeah, I got a couple of really good Canadian stories that I've been working on, and they're kind of at a bit of a fragile state right now to mention what they are, Thom. But yeah, good stories, good stories. Here's the issue I have. So the Hip, their whole story, like, it's the best story. Like, and I don't mean the best story. It's like it's got the most. It offered sort of the most, and part of that is the tragedy of my brother's death. So I mean, I'm not kind of rah obviously, but I've really come to grips with, like, okay, this, as Paul has said to me a couple times, and he is right, that this was my Fully Completely.
Yeah.
And I'm really feeling like, so it really makes a lot of sense to me. And so kind of what I do next, I'm kind of just like, oh, I just want to really keep doing what I do. But I have, with this doc, I've climbed the mountain, and I feel really good about it. And I don't, I don't expect to climb a mountain like this ever again, and I don't need to. And I don't think I want to, actually. I kind of left everything I had, on the whatever in the film. So that's a really nice feeling, to be quite honest with you, at my age and stage. It's a really nice feeling.
Yeah, well, and you should be proud. I mean, I know as a long time, even a Rush fan too. I mean, they did a lot after Moving Pictures, even though Moving Pictures was that record. Same with the Tragically Hip, Fully Completely. Yeah, they revisited it on a tour later, but man, they did a lot of great stuff after that. So I'm sure you got a ton of great stuff in you.
Appreciate that, Thom. Thank you.
Paul, anything from you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with these really great guys playing a band. We did a record, and we toured and played some festivals in Canada, like the last 2 summers. Really like the festival gigs, so you don't have to worry about tickets, and you just walk in and play, and then you get paid, and there's crowds there. And So it would be similar to what Mike said. Like, I've done my thing, but I still, I like getting creative sometimes. So right now I got to write a bunch of songs this fall and hopefully record at some point later winter or in the spring and do it again and just keep it fun. It's a great bunch of guys. So, and then, with the hip, there's generally, there's a book here too, and then up to here box set. So it's kind of like, okay, so let's calm these up on the hip for a while. And so I think we're all just going to get up to our own little things. And you try and make it fun, and you try it and stay creative and keep writing songs and playing gigs. But as my dad said, after, yeah, sure, they're going to do music, but their heart's not going to be in it like it was in the hip. That's the sadness of it, but happy because it happened. And so just I'll get up to little things. Love to get to Buffalo, but immigration's complicated, so I got to cobble a few gigs to make it worth it as far as immigration costs. Yeah, so I'll just keep chipping away.
Well, if you ever need to sneak over the border or anything, just let me know. We'll get you in at least for one gig, because it really would be great to have you in Buffalo. There's some nice rooms I think you do really well in. So
okay, well, I may check you up on that. Thanks.
I'll be there.
All right, gentlemen. Yes. Again, thank you so much. Congratulations on just a great piece of work, and I'm just looking forward to see what comes next.
Right on.
All right. Well, it was great talking to you.
Yeah.
Oh, pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.